Hi there, you're listening to Arcsoncompod, the Archie Sonic comic podcast. I'm your host Nathan, and together we'll be experiencing the highs, the lows, and the downright weirds of the Archie Sonic the comic series. Today we'll be looking at issue 5, and as always, let's begin with the cover itself. We have a lot of white space, as we did in issue 1, but it looks a lot more intentional this time. We have the title of Sonic the Hedgehog, big and bold at the top, with flames around it for that cool 90s full of attitude energy. Looking down, we discover the fire from Sonic speeding past, with Rotor announcing that the comic is the hottest thing on the shelf. You know, because of the fire and all. While Tails warns us that it's going pretty fast. It's pretty direct and simple, but I think that was probably a smart approach. A bold, bright comic cover is going to catch the eye after all. We also have a little information on the front page this time too, giving us an idea of what to expect inside. In this issue, Olympic trial and error. Judging by the cover alone, it really feels like the comic's starting to hit its stride, but let's read it and find out if that's true. We jump straight into Olympic trials and error and... Oh, hang on, let me just... Yeah, no, I've checked. That wasn't my mistake. It's a single trial on the front page, but inside the book it's multiple trials with trials and error instead. Not a huge mistake, but there it is. Surprised I even noticed it. We see Sonic playing baseball, batting the ball before zooming over to catch his own hit. Tails watches on, explaining to us that Sonic is the only baseball player who can hit a line drive and catch it himself, and that's why he's Tails' sports hero. I know absolutely nothing about baseball, so I'm just going to trust the comic in using correct terminology and go along with it. Sonic decides he's not done showing off enough just yet though, however, and decides to take things one step further. He tells Tails he's going to hit a long fly ball, proceeds to hit the ball, proclaims he's going to catch it before he even hits the... well... It cuts off there as the page ends. I'm guessing he's about to fall over and miss his catch completely, but I guess we'll have to turn the page to find out. Wham! Sonic runs straight into a wall because he was too focused on the ball instead of where he was going. Well, he may not have fallen over, but I was still pretty close with my guess. Tails rushes over to check on Sonic, asking if he's okay. Sonic thinks he's fine, though he says he now knows what people mean when they say they've stopped in their tracks. The way he phrases it sounds like it's meant to be a pun, but it's precisely what just happened to him. He was stopped in his tracks. It wasn't really a play on words at all. Maybe I'm just reading too much into this, though. What did he run into, though, you might wonder? A wall, yes, but a wall for what? Well, we discover the answer with a zoom out, as we get our first look at the Robotnik Stadium, a huge sports stadium that looks like an enormous bowl, plastered with a huge single image of Robotnik's face. There's a gap between the bottom front teeth for a turnstile where you can enter, and honestly the whole thing is just horrifying. I know he likes to put his face and name on stuff, but did he really sign off on this monstrosity? It's hardly flattering. They wonder where the stadium even came from, and a nearby SWAT bot is only too happy to tell them. In case it wasn't obvious, this stadium was built by, and I quote, your future master, the belliness of jelliness himself, Dr. Robotnik. Once again, there's another new title to add to the list if you're keeping track of the Doctor's offensive nicknames. Tails takes cover behind Sonic, while Sonic demands to know what the SWAT bot's evil creator is up to now. It seems that Robotnik wishes to challenge Sonic and his freedom fighter friends to the first, and in their case last, Robotropolis Olympic Games. Of course, Robotnik knows he'll need a way to convince them to participate, and so he offers them a grand reward. If they can win even one of the 4 events, he will return Planet Mobius to normal. Yet in exchange, if they lose every event, they must submit themselves willingly to being turned into robots. As the SWAT bot explains this, we get a pretty neat little shot of Sonic and Tails in the SWAT bot's shadow, really highlighting their expressions, with Tails looking surprised while Sonic looks outright furious at the situation. To finish up, the SWAT bot switches over to a personal message from the Doctor himself, directed at Sonic. You'd be forgiven for thinking it might be a genuine threat or something intelligent, given how serious the stakes seem to be, but it isn't. Instead, the SWAT bot announces, presumably in Robotnik's voice, "You can't beat us, nya nya nya," with accompanying taunting hand gestures. I think it would have been a tongue too, if the SWAT bot even has a tongue. Tails is riled up by the taunting, but Sonic holds his friend back while giving the SWAT bot his answer. Sonic says the freedom fighters accept his challenge, and in fact he knows exactly what they'll say. Of course, still being in the gag era of the comics means this can't be as straightforward as Sonic is expecting it to be. Our next panel has us back at the Great Forest as huge text floats overhead, presumably indicating a united yell from the freedom fighters as they declare, "No way, Sonic!" We then get a little more detail on the subject, with Sally convinced the entire thing must be a trick because Robotnik never keeps his promises. Rota disagrees, however. He thinks Robotnik does keep his promises. After all, he promised to be mean, gross, rotten and evil. That's precisely what he is. Sonic confidently agrees that Robotnik can't be trusted, but he suggests they take the risk, because he knows they can't lose. Antoine, already looking unimpressed, asks why, but the cocky smirk on Sonic's face makes his answer pretty clear already. Sonic describes himself as the best athlete on planet Mobius, and thus intends to enter all of the events and win. Tails eagerly asks to join too, but Antoine dismisses the idea before Sonic can respond, suggesting that when it comes to athletics, Tails has two left tails. Antoine then goes on to suggest that if anyone should be on the team, then it should be him, Antoine de Coulette, the champion fencer of Mobius. He illustrates with a swish of his sword, carving a Zorro-style Z into Rota's hat as he declares, "Z what I mean?" That was unexpected. Not only did Antoine get to do something vaguely cool, he even got to make a neat little quip, and nothing went wrong for him. Good for you, Antoine. About time you got to do something. Tails sighs as he gives up, believing Antoine to be right. He tells the others that he'll just stay home and watch the Olympics on RBV, which an editor's note tells us means Robotnik's belly vision. I have visions of this just being a huge CRT TV designed to look like Robotnik, and I don't know if that's disturbing or if I want one. As Tails walks away, Sonic tries to call after him and Rota looks mildly concerned, while Sally shoves Antoine, who doesn't seem to realise what he's done wrong. Tails perks up a little, however, as he comes up with an idea of how to keep himself busy. He'll create a sculpture of Sonic to surprise him with when he wins the Olympics. I'd think a sculpture of themselves was an odd gift to give someone, but given how full of himself Sonic seems here, I imagine he'd probably quite like it. The following day we find ourselves in Robotnik Stadium, the freedom fighters entering the arena in the background as we focus on Robotnik and his bad nicks for the moment. Borobot announces, "Your enemies have arrived, O Sleazemeister," which is... well, it's another new title, but nothing to do with Robotnik's weight, so I'm not sure why that counts for his offensive nickname tally or not. I guess that's up for you to decide. Robotnik is thrilled that they have arrived, and asks his swap bot if he's sure that Sonic isn't wearing his special sneakers, at which point we discover Robotnik's sinister plan to ensure his victory. After delivering Robotnik's message, the swap bot followed Sonic. While the hedgehog was swimming, he stole his shoes and replaced them with special look-alike energy-draining sneakers that Robotnik invented. We get a glimpse of Sonic relaxing in the lake here, floating on the top, and something about him being barefooted somehow makes him seem very naked, despite being naked all the time anyway. We also see his bare feet, and he seems to have 3 long toes per foot. It's not particularly important, but based on what I've seen on the internet, some people appear to be really interested in the feet of Sonic and his friends. Robotnik is pleased with Swapbot's performance and asks what he did with the shoes, to which Swapbot explains that he threw them in the trash. Robotnik crushes his head with a huge steel hammer, because he wanted those sneakers to put into his trophy room, right next to his nursery school Brat of the Year award. Poor Swapbot. You were so close to doing your job perfectly, something no other badnik has managed until now. Robotnik seems to feel better after a little violence, though, and announces that it's time for the games to begin. We have the freedom fighters in the stands, cheering for Sonic. Both Rota and Sally are rooting for him, while Antoine nervously reminds him of what will happen to them if he loses. Sonic tells them he's going to put them at ease by showing off a few split-second warp laps around the track and start spinning up his feet, ready to speed off. Only to stop abruptly with a zonk and claps face first onto the floor. The freedom fighters rush over to check on him, Sally asking what's wrong. Sonic somehow finds the energy to explain that he suddenly feels weak and tired for some reason, like all of his energy is just gone. Antoine throws up his hands in panic and defeat, suggesting they get out the metal polish and prepare because they're all doomed to become robots. Weirdly, Rota's just kind of standing there looking mildly bemused, despite the terrible fate unfolding before him. Seriously, if you have access to the comic, go and check him out at the bottom right of page 6. He's just standing there with a finger to his lips and looking only mildly concerned. I guess maybe he doesn't really mind becoming a robot. Anyway, all of the freedom fighters here except for Rota look worried as to how things will progress, as we finish up part 1 of this story on this tense cliffhanger. We move straight on to part 2 of this story, as is tradition, but before we get into that, let me just ask, do you remember the title of this story? Because on the cover it was Olympic Trial and Error, and on page 1 it was Olympic Trials and Error, where the trial was suddenly plural. I bring this up because part 2 is titled Olympic Trials and Errors, as it seems the errors have also multiplied now. I'm genuinely not sure if this is intentional or a weird mistake, but I thought it was something interesting and worth pointing out all the same. Anyway, here we begin inside the stadium, with a huge scoreboard for 2 teams. We have them, and in brackets, losers, and then us, and in brackets, winners. You know, just in case we were ever under the illusion that Robotnik might be playing fair. Robotnik reminds us of what's happening as he announces that Sonic's had his energy drained by the sneaky sneakers, and is confident that this means he's going to win the competition. He has his swap bot prepare the portable bot-on-the-spot robot making machine. Here the machine's a colourful red, has some Robotnik R logo branding, and is on tread rather than wheels. I feel like there's a lot of background upgrades and changes going on with this bot-on-the-spot machine, and for what it's worth, it's really working. It's good to see Robotnik really focusing hard on a project like this and making improvements. Far too many villains have a project fail once then just give up on it entirely. Just because Sonic's out doesn't mean the game is up, however. Sally calls on Robotnik to hold off on his plans, because if Sonic can't compete then she, Antoine and Rota will take his place. Both Rota and Antoine seem less certain about this, which I guess means they probably weren't consulted before being volunteered, but what can you do? It's the princess's orders after all. That, and failing to do anything, would mean being roboticised. Robotnik agrees to Sally's demands that they be allowed to compete in Sonic's place. He'll enjoy seeing them try and defeat his team of evil and powerful badniks. Now the games can finally begin. We start off with 3 events. First of all, we have the long jump. Antoine announces his movements, beginning with the perfect approach followed by the perfect leap, and lands flat on his face after his jump. Overhead, a small robot rabbit sails past, saying, "And then the perfect flap, like my ears. There you are, Antoine." Poor Antoine. He almost had a chance to actually contribute for a moment there. Also, the rabbit has a surprising amount of personality, and it's the first time we've ever seen it. There's also something slightly odd and more personal about the badniks knowing the names of the other freedom fighters, which is a nice touch. It's good we're seeing the rest of the team are just as important as Sonic. And if the badniks know them by name, perhaps they're actually considered as much of a problem as the Blue Blur himself. Next up, we have the swimming event, with Sally competing. She mentions she's always been the best swimmer in the forest, only for an octopus badnik, which might be called Octobot. No, that doesn't sound right. Let me look it up. Oh, it's called Octus, apparently. Anyway, Octus zooms past effortlessly and laughs that Sally looks all washed up to her. Wow, first a snarky rabbit badnik that knows their names, now an octopus badnik that understands puns. Robotnik sure can get personality into these robots, can't he? Last up, we have weightlifting, with Rota hefting a huge weight overhead after a bit of struggling, and challenging any badnik to beat his impressive display. I was expecting some kind of a specialist bot for this, maybe a gorilla or an elephant or something, but no! A regular old swap bot comes along and effortlessly lifts up both Rota and the weight he's holding, with a "You were saying, dumbbell?" Seeing the different badniks here is really going to show how varied and talented they are, and much as we're still dealing with gags and jokes right now, you can certainly see how Robotnik and his very varied badnik army could pose a real threat. Across all these different badniks, there's got to be very little he's not prepared for. With 3 events down, we're on to our final event. It's all over unless one of the freedom fighters can win a race against Robotnik's fastest flying boss bomber. Of course, with Sonic quite literally out of the running, it seems they don't stand a chance. It's at this point we suddenly cut away to Robotropolis junkyard and find Tails, who's collecting scrap metal for his sculpture. Those of you paying close attention to the story might already see where this is heading. Tails is surprised that, amidst all the scrap metal, he finds something familiar. Sonic sneakers! Tails realises that Sonic won't be able to compete without his special sneakers, and so grabs them and rushes off. He's got to get Sonic sneakers to him, and fast. Back at the track, the race has begun. Robotnik guffaws at the sight before him, because with his buzz bomber so far ahead, the freedom fighters might as well be running backwards. Sally and Rota are cheering on Antoine, but he's already panting and out of breath as he jogs around the track, already a full corner behind the badnik. We see Sally in tears as she realises it's all going to be over soon. The moment that buzz bomber crosses the finish line, they're finished. It seems odd to me she would actually go along with the agreement if they lose, given she doesn't expect Robotnik to hold up his end of the bargain, but I guess that's the downside of being the heroes. You have to honour your agreements and play fair. Fortunately, it looks like things might not be looking so bleak after all. Sonic suddenly seems well again, and declares it's not over just yet, giving his trademark impatient foot tap as Sally turns to look at him and announces his name with joyous surprise. Sonic has them stand back as he's about to kick up some dust with hyperspeed, and proceeds to zoom off onto the track. We flash forward to the end of the track, where the Buzz Bomber is waiting for Antoine. Not content to simply win, it's intent on taunting him by waiting until he catches up before it zips across the finish line. So close, Buzz Bomber. You'd have been able to win if you hadn't been such a jerk about it. Also, Antoine's silhouette nearby actually looks pretty close. It's hard to tell for certain, but I'm starting to think that Antoine wasn't actually all that slow. He was never going to win, but he definitely gave it a good try. Doesn't matter now though, because suddenly a circle of dust is kicked up and the Buzz Bomber can't see a thing. It panics because it can't see and decides it can't wait any longer, so moves to cross the finish line in a hurry. The Buzz Bomber celebrates its victory after noticing it's crossed a red line on the floor. That's it, I guess. Freedom fighters are done for. Except perhaps not. Sonic grins and says, "Look again, Buzzbrain," while pointing to the floor. Casting our eyes down, we see what Sonic is pointing to isn't the finish line, but the starting line. Caught up in the confusing cloud of dust, the Buzz Bomber flew backwards and crossed the starting line instead. In the foreground of this explanation, Antoine flops over the finish line, winning the race. I can't believe it. Antoine saved the day. Yes, with Sonic's help, of course, but he still did his part. Robotnik is furious to find that Sonic has his sneakers back, and orders his bots to destroy the hedgehog. But Sonic decides that turnabout is fair play. Robotnik was supposed to give up if they won after all. Still, Robotnik broke his promise. Sonic's going to break his machine with a sonic spin. The bot-on-the-spot machine begins to short-circuit, leading to Robotnik and his badniks running away to find safety. Our heroes don't have to rush anywhere, however, because Rotor's had the good sense to unplug the machine before it could explode. Why was there a plug on the portable machine? Shouldn't it be self-powered? Oh well. Either way, the day is saved and everyone can celebrate. Sonic congratulates Tails on saving the day by running over to them, and says that even Antoine will have to admit he's a good athlete now. Tails is thrilled with the praise, and wonders if Antoine will even give him fencing lessons now. But judging by the state Antoine is in, it might have to be fainting lessons instead. We see Sally trying to wake up Antoine and tell him he won, though he's barely conscious and is begging for this to be the finish. Which it is. That finishes up both the competition and this story as a whole. Next up, we have a one-page story of KTV, Not Old Television, presents Sonic's 10-second workout, for people who don't want to spend a lot of time exercising. If you're looking to get your exercise in here, I'll repeat it for you, so you can try it out for yourself. First of all, we spend a few seconds spinning our feet really fast. Then, we take a few more seconds to run around the room, floor to ceiling, before finally taking a 3 or 4 second dash around the entire world. And with that, the workout's over. Here's hoping you managed to pull that off at home too. Of course, Sonic says if that's too time consuming, you can always try Rotor's 8-second workout. We discover this involves 8 seconds of Rotor attempting to touch his toes, before spending the rest of the day trying to straighten up again. I'll be honest, that sounds a little close to my own athletic ability. With that, we move on to the next story. Chomp on this, chump! Rotor runs in to tell everyone about the great ant farm his magazine is offering, but they're too busy right now. Tails is pulling Sonic, who is pulling a spoon, which is buried in the batter of a bowl, which Sally is holding onto and trying to pull in the opposite direction. Sally thinks she may have used too much flour and not enough water, and I'm pretty sure I've been through this exact experience myself in the past. It's okay, Sally, it happens to the best of us. Suddenly, there's a BAM! As Sonic stumbles backwards and lands on poor Tails, pulling out not only the spoon, but also a solid bowl-shaped chunk of batter with it, while Sally is left holding an empty bowl. At least that's out of the way, though. Sonic apologises for being too busy before, and asks Rotor what he was saying about his aunt's farm. And Rotor corrects him to say that he meant ant farm, and tells him to take a look at the magazine. I get the aunt joke here, but unfortunately it doesn't quite work with my accent, I'm afraid. Sonic is trying to be nice here and gently asks, "Why an ant farm?" And we get a little explanation from Rota, asking what could possibly be more exciting than watching a colony of ants crawl around inside a glass case. Sonic's answer is, not doing that. And I have to say, I'm on Sonic's side here. But hey, different strokes for different folks, I guess. Rota laughs off Sonic's snide remark and rushes off to mail his order form. Suddenly, we find ourselves at Robotropolis, with a population sign that simply says, enslaved. Inside, Robotnik is gleefully announcing that his plan worked, and one of the freedom fighters has mailed in for his phony ant farm. Robotnik orders his bot to mail the package before there's no more package to mail, and we get a few chomps coming from the mysterious package. The SWAT bot agrees. We get another new title for Robotnik here, for those of you eager to hear more of them, as the SWAT bot says, "Yes, O Sultan of Slobbiness." Robotnik laughs that thanks to the ant farm he can anticipate the end of Sonic and his friends very soon. It might be too soon for me to call this a bad plan, but couldn't Robotnik have just stopped here? Rota sent him a location of Knothole in order to get the package, right? I mean, maybe it's a PO box or something, but there's no suggestion of that so far. You've got the address, Robotnik. You could just go and conquer Knothole right now. As we move back to Knothole Forest, we even have a text box from the comic pointing to a stump in the forest telling us to keep quiet, that it's the secret entrance to Knothole. Don't tell us, comic, tell Rota. He's the one giving the address away because he wants an ant farm. Rota is gleefully showing off his new ant farm to Sonic, Tails, Sally and Antoine, none of whom seem particularly interested but are humouring him all the same. Sonic asks where the ants are, though. They're not in the farm yet, and it turns out they're inside a metal container and already sound hungry. The container also has a skull on it and says, "Danger, do not open." Still, Rota's already fallen for the trap of something being suspiciously free, so I doubt he'd pay attention to this warning either, even if he did read it. Rota unscrews the lid and it pops off violently, as an ant launches from the container and leaps straight at a nearby oak table. We have a whole panel filled with chomp, 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 and then the oak table is completely gone. Sally points out the ant ate it, and Antoine suggests it's an ant-eater. I guess because it eats a lot. But Sonic realises it's not an ant at all. No, rather than an ant, it's a termite. Rota's never seen a termite like this one before, though, with its weirdly buff body, and decides to check out his Insectlopedia bug book to learn about it. We discover this particular species is a Termite Nator, also known as a Pesticus etamus. It can eat anything made out of wood or, as we find out after a few more chomps, paper. Rota's bug book is being devoured before his very eyes. The termite is eating the chairs now, and Antoine declares he won't stand for this. Tails points out he'll have to stand for it, though, given the lack of chairs, and looks incredibly smug about making his silly little joke. And that smugness definitely elevates the joke to make it actually quite funny. Rota warns them this isn't the worst part, though, because the more wood a termite nator eats, the more it grows, and grows, and grows. We see the termite slowly increasing in size as it eats through an entire chair. It's only now that Sonic realises just how dangerous this could get. The wood in the underground hideout is one thing, but the great forest that hides and protects Knothole is almost entirely trees, and therefore wood. That means the termite nator will just keep on eating, and soon enough the forest will be gone. They'll have nowhere left to hide. Rota handily chips in with a "wouldn't you know it" pun, which, I don't know, it's maybe not the right time now to make light of the situation. Not when you're the one responsible for the mess, at least. A short while later, we're stuck with an enormous termite eating the freedom fighters out of house and home. Sally watches on it as it eats the last of their furniture, tucking into a huge chest of drawers as if it was a sandwich. And it turns out they're down to their last book too. It's Sally's favourite cookbook as well, but that gives Sonic an idea. He asks if it was the book she used to make her, extra thick pancake batter yesterday, which I guess is a polite way of talking about her cooking accident, and she confirms it is. With that in mind, Sonic has her read out the exact same ingredients for him that she used yesterday. This calls for a new Sonic speed, he says. Microwave speed. We see Sonic following Sally's cooking instructions here. We begin with 10 cups of pancake flour. Mix in a dozen eggs, 8 sticks of non-fat, non-dairy, low-cal, high-octane margarine, And let's just stop a moment to appreciate the fact her margarine is high octane. I did chuckle a little at that the first time, and it's way too easy to skip over it. Last but not least, she accidentally only added a single teaspoon of water. Wow, no wonder it went wrong. Surprised she was able to stir this at all. After mixing up this terrible pancake batter, Sonic races up to the surface to get hold of a hollow log. Moments later, he returns and approaches the giant termite, yelling, "Here, bug breath, jump on this yummy log." The termite happily takes his offer and bites down, only to find the log has jammed his jaw shut. It collapses against the wall, defeated as it struggles to talk, while Sonic explains that he filled the log with Sally's pancake batter, and thanks to that, the termite's jaws are now clamped shut. Rota is determined to get a closer look at the termite now he can, and approaches with a magnifying glass. He finds a tag saying, "Made in Robotropolis," because I suppose even Robotnik isn't immune to trading standards and has to declare his product's place of origin. It's easy enough for Rota to put two and two together and realise the termite is actually a robot, built by Robotnik, and that means he can adjust its wires a little. Back at Robotropolis, Robotnik is complaining that his Termite Nator should have devoured the Great Forest by now. He's interrupted by a swap bot who brings in a large wooden crate that's addressed to the Doctor, and for once, Robotnik has the weird nickname for his swap bot instead. He tells Hardware Head to hurry up and open the crate, wondering it's a present, because he's never had a present before, only hate mail. Yet the moment the crate is opened, a huge yellow hand reaches out and grabs him. We see how things are progressing as we skip over to later on, where the giant termite is holding Robotnik in one hand while sitting and munching on metal girders, while Robotnik orders his bot to feed the termite even more metal before it eats all of them instead. In case it wasn't clear here, we get a final little panel from Sonic explaining what's happened. Rota turned Robotnik's bug into a metal muncher. Now isn't that ironic? He had another little pun there, with iron-ic. I feel like we didn't get many puns for a little while, but then suddenly a bunch at once. But I don't mind, I do enjoy a good pun. With that, we finish up this story, left to wonder if Robotnik will survive the giant metal-eating termite that's been unleashed on Robotropolis. Next up, we're on to another one-page mini-story, titled Fast Food. We begin with Sonic addressing us directly as the readers, or specifically, as dudes, because in the 90s, if you were a mascot with a rad attitude, that was the only way to refer to someone. Sonic mentions that being the world's fastest has many advantages. For example, ever been cold when your dinner's getting cold? Well, he says, watch this. We get someone from the Great Forest yelling, "Sonic, your dinner's getting..." only for Sonic to zoom over and gulp it down in a single bite before they can finish their sentence. Sally manages to say cold, as it turns out she was the one calling Sonic, and Sonic grins confidently at showing off his skills. However, it seems there's such a thing as being too fast, because he suddenly seems to be feeling a little queasy. We find out it wasn't the speed that was the problem, though. Sally walks over with a steaming plate of food as she asks, "Why did you eat that bowl of wax fruit?" Oh dear. Looks like running fast and thinking fast don't come together. Hopefully next time someone can make sure it's real food he's eating. With that, we come to the end of issue 5. There are some fan letters at the end of most issues, but I won't be getting into those as we're really just here for the story. I did take a quick look though, and one in particular did catch my eye which I wanted to share. It was from Cleek Stevenson of Alabama, who says both they and their friends have realised that Robotnik and Mario have two things in common. They're both fat and extremely stupid. Just in case any of you thought the console wars were a new thing, here's your proof they were always abound, even back when Sega was in the console game. So, how did you all find this issue? Did you enjoy it? Did anything stand out for you? Are you having fun with the gag era? Or are you eager to move on to some real stories already? Whatever the case, let me know, either by leaving a comment on the episode, or sending over an email to arcsoncompod@gmail.com. That's arcsoncompod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Next week we'll be moving on to issue 6, so if you're reading along, there's your task until next time. I've been your host Nathan, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen and re-experience these comics with me. It's been a blast so far, and I look forward to continuing. Here's hoping you'll tune in next time, and until then, take care of yourselves and have a great week. Goodbye.